The emergency beacon cut through the peaceful hum of the Galactic Council's monitoring station like a scream in the night. Communications Officer Zexhi's 4 eyes widened as the distress signal flooded her screens with urgent data. The crystalline being's natural blue glow flickered to an alarming red as she processed the information. Council Leader Morthak, we have a Priority 1 distress call from the Kepler 442 system, Zexhi announced, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of her species. The Velthari colony is under attack by Krogar raiders. The massive reptilian council leader's scales shifted from their usual calm green to an agitated orange. Morthak had served the Galactic Council for over 3 centuries, and he had never heard such desperation in a transmission. The Velthari were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders, their butterfly-like wings and gentle nature making them beloved by most civilized species. "How many ships are attacking them?" Morthak's deep voice rumbled through the command center. "The initial scan shows at least 200 Krogar warships," Zexhi replied, her harmonics becoming more strained. "The Velthari have maybe 30 civilian transports and 5 outdated patrol craft. They're completely outmatched." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of an impossible situation. The Krogar were the galaxy's most feared raiders, a species that had evolved on a world of endless storms and crushing gravity. Their ships were built for war, their crews trained from birth to fight and destroy. They showed no mercy to those they deemed weak. "What forces do we have available in that sector?" Morthak asked, though he already suspected the answer would not be good. Defense Coordinator Sulvek, a being whose gaseous form swirled in patterns that reflected his emotions, materialized at a nearby console. His usually silver clouds had turned a dark gray. "The nearest council fleet is the 7th Expeditionary Force, but they're 12 light-years away dealing with a border dispute. Even at maximum speed, they couldn't reach the Velthari in less than 8 standard days." "The Velthari won't last 8 hours against the Krogar," Morthak stated grimly. Throughout the galaxy, the Krogar's reputation was built on swift, brutal attacks that left entire colonies as nothing more than debris fields. Zexhi's screens suddenly flashed with an update. "Council Leader, I'm receiving more distress signals. The attack has begun. The Velthari are reporting massive casualties. Their planetary shields are failing." The command center fell into a stunned silence. Everyone present knew they were witnessing the beginning of another massacre. The Krogar had struck dozens of peaceful colonies over the past decade, and the Council's response had always been the same: too little, too late. "Wait," Zexhi said, her harmonic voice suddenly filled with confusion. "I'm detecting something unusual. There's another signal coming from the same system, but it's not Velthari in origin." "Another species?" Sulvek's gaseous form swirled with curiosity. "Are there other ships in the area?" "That's just it," Zexhi replied, her 4 eyes now focused intently on her instruments. "The signal is coming from a planet in the same system, but according to our records, that world was marked as uninhabitable. High gravity, dangerous wildlife, unstable weather patterns. We classified it as a death world decades ago." Morthak's scales shifted to a deep purple, indicating intense interest. "What kind of signal are you receiving?" "It's a response to the Velthari distress call," Zexhi said, her voice filled with disbelief. "Someone down there is saying they're going to help." The idea seemed absurd. What kind of civilization could survive on a death world? And even if they could, what help could they possibly offer against 200 Krogar warships? "Put the transmission through," Morthak ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything they had heard before. It was rough, determined, and carried an edge that made even the battle-hardened council members uncomfortable. "This is Colonel Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We've received the Velthari distress signal. Be advised, we are launching an immediate response. ETA to your position is 3 hours. The silence that followed was broken by Sulvek's gaseous form, suddenly expanding with shock. Did they just say 3 hours? That's impossible. Even our fastest ships couldn't make that journey in less than 6 hours. And who are these humans? Zexhai added, quickly searching the Council's databases. I have no record of any species called humans or any world called Earth in our files. Morthak stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the command center. In all his years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something about that human's voice told him this was not a species to underestimate. Send a message back, he ordered. Inform them of the scale of the Krogar force and warn them that this is not a fight they can win. Zexhai transmitted the message, and the response came back almost immediately. Understood, Council Leader. Scale of enemy force noted. We appreciate the warning, but we've dealt with worse odds. Earth's Deathworlders don't abandon those who call for help. The transmission cut off, leaving the Council members staring at each other in confusion and growing unease. Deathworlders? Sulvek whispered, his gaseous form turning an alarmed shade of black. The term was known throughout the galaxy, referring to species that evolved on the most dangerous planets imaginable. Such beings were the stuff of legends and nightmares. Meanwhile, in orbit around the third planet in the Sol system, the human fleet received the call to arms. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, a massive vessel that dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen before. The ship's hull bore the scars of countless battles, each mark a testament to humanity's refusal to surrender. Admiral, we have multiple ships responding to the emergency deployment order, reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. The Fifth Fleet is already moving to intercept. ETA to the Kepler 442 system is 2 hours and 57 minutes. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Humanity had only recently discovered they were not alone in the universe, but they had quickly learned that the galaxy was not a safe place. The discovery of faster-than-light travel had opened the stars to them, but it had also revealed the existence of predators like the Krogar. What's our force composition? Rodriguez asked. 12 heavy battleships, 36 cruisers, 48 destroyers, and 60 frigates, Park replied, plus support vessels. Total crew complement is approximately 50,000. And the enemy? Intelligence estimates 200 Krogar warships attacking a peaceful colony. The Krogar ships are heavily armed but built for raiding, not fleet engagement. Rodriguez smiled grimly. The Krogar were about to learn why Earth had been marked as a death world, and why the humans who evolved there were not to be trifled with. Signal the fleet, Rodriguez ordered. Maximum burn to the Kepler 442 system. We have people to save and a lesson to teach. As the human fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives, the very fabric of space-time bent around them. The technology they used was different from anything the galaxy had seen, more aggressive, more powerful, much like the species that had created it. Back on the Galactic Council station, Morthak found himself pacing despite his advanced age. Something about the human's response troubled him, though he couldn't identify exactly what it was. Council Leader, Zexhai called out, her harmonic voice filled with amazement. I'm tracking the human ships. Their speed is incredible. They're actually going to make it to the Kepler 442 system in under 3 hours. How is that possible? Sulvek asked, his form swirling with agitation. What kind of drive system could achieve such speeds? Before anyone could answer, new alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The battle had begun in earnest, and the Velthari were dying. The Krogar fleet hung in space around the Velthari colony world like a swarm of metallic predators. War Chief Graktor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Blood Reaper, watching as his raiders systematically destroyed everything the peaceful butterfly-winged beings had built over centuries. Graktor's massive form was typical of his species, standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick, armored skin that could deflect small arms fire. His tusks gleamed with metal caps that he had earned through countless victories, and his scarred face bore the ritual markings of a warrior who had never known defeat. "Report," he growled to his subordinate, Sub-Chief Vexkar. 47 Velthari ships destroyed, planetary shields down to 30%. The mining stations are already ours, and we've captured 12 cargo vessels full of rare metals, Vexkar replied with satisfaction. The Krogar had turned raiding into an art form, and this attack was proceeding exactly as planned. Good. What resistance are they offering? Minimal. A few patrol boats are trying to defend the evacuation transports, but they're no match for our weapons. The Velthari are fleeing to their inner system, hoping to reach the space lanes where council ships might find them. Graktor's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. Let them run. We'll hunt them down one by one. Their cargo holds are full of valuable goods, and their ships will make excellent additions to our fleet. The Krogar way of war was simple and effective. They would strike fast and hard, overwhelming their enemies before they could organize a defense. Then they would take everything of value and leave nothing but wreckage behind. It had worked against dozens of species across the galaxy. "War Chief, I'm detecting an incoming transmission," reported the communications officer. "It appears to be from something called the Galactic Council." Graktor's tusks gleamed as he smiled. The Council was known throughout the galaxy for their weakness, their endless debates while stronger species took what they wanted. "Put it through. Let's hear what the Council cowards have to say." The voice that came through the speakers was deep and measured, clearly trying to project authority. "Krogar Fleet, this is Council Leader Morthak. You are attacking a peaceful colony in violation of galactic law. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The Krogar bridge erupted in laughter. Graktor had heard similar threats dozens of times before, and they were always empty words. "Council Leader," Graktor replied mockingly, "by the time your pathetic fleets arrive, there will be nothing left here but wreckage. The Velthari chose to settle in space we consider ours. They will pay the price for their mistake." "You have been warned, Graktor. The consequences of your actions will be severe." The transmission ended, and Graktor turned back to watching his fleet's systematic destruction of the Velthari colony. The Council's threats were meaningless. Even if they did send a fleet, it would take days to arrive, and by then the Krogar would be long gone with their prizes. "War Chief," Vexkar called out suddenly, his voice filled with confusion. "I'm detecting something unusual on long-range sensors." "What kind of something?" "Unknown ships, approaching at incredible speed. They'll be here in less than an hour." Graktor's expression darkened. "Council ships? No, sir. These signatures are unlike anything in our database, and their speed is impossible. Nothing should be able to travel that fast." Before Graktor could respond, his tactical officer spoke up. "War Chief, I'm receiving a transmission from the unknown fleet." "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything the Krogar had heard before. It was hard, cold, and carried an undertone of barely controlled violence that made even the battle-hardened raiders uncomfortable. "Krogar Fleet, this is Admiral Rodriguez of the Human Defense Force. You have exactly one chance to withdraw from this system and release any prisoners you've taken. If you do not comply, we will consider you a hostile force and respond accordingly." The silence on the bridge was broken by Graktor's roar of laughter. "Humans? I've never heard of such a species, and they dare to threaten the Krogar?" He activated the transmission system. "Unknown humans, I am War Chief Graktor of the Blood Reaper. You are interfering with a Krogar raid. Turn around now, or we will add your ships to the wreckage we leave behind." The response came back immediately, and there was something in the human's voice that made Graktor's blood run cold. Negative, War Chief. You've attacked civilians under our protection. Prepare to face the consequences. The transmission cut off, and Graktor found himself staring at the tactical display with growing unease. His scanners showed the approaching human fleet clearly now, and what he saw made no sense. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. 156 vessels, the tactical officer replied. "But War Chief, their configurations are unlike anything we've encountered. Heavy armor, massive weapon signatures, and they're still approaching at impossible speed." Graktor straightened his massive frame. The Krogar had never retreated from a battle, and he wouldn't be the first War Chief to break that tradition. "Signal the fleet. Combat formation. We'll show these humans what happens when someone challenges the Krogar." Across the Krogar fleet, 200 warships turned to face the approaching human vessels. Each Krogar ship was a masterpiece of destructive engineering built for speed and firepower. They had never faced an enemy they couldn't overwhelm through superior numbers and brutal tactics. But as the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, the Krogar warriors felt something they had never experienced before: doubt. The human ships were massive, larger than anything the galaxy had seen. Their hulls were scarred and pitted, marked by battles that had been fought and won. But it wasn't their size that disturbed the Krogar. It was something else, something in the way they moved that spoke of predators who had been born to fight. "War Chief," the tactical officer said, his voice now filled with uncertainty. "Their weapons are powering up. Energy readings are off the charts." Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the Krogar fleet arrange itself for battle. Behind him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their faces grim but determined. They had answered the call for help, and they would not let the Velthari down. "Enemy fleet composition?" Rodriguez asked calmly. 200 warships, various classes. They're designed for raiding operations, heavily armed but lightly armored compared to our standards, reported his tactical officer. "They're forming a standard attack formation. Any sign they're going to withdraw?" "Negative, sir. They're powering weapons and moving to engage." Rodriguez nodded grimly. Humanity had hoped that their reputation would precede them, that the Krogar might choose to withdraw rather than face Earth's Deathworlders in battle. But it seemed the galaxy would need another lesson about what happened when predators tried to prey on the innocent. "Signal the fleet," Rodriguez ordered. "All ships, weapons free. Show them why Earth is called a death world." The human ships spread out in a formation that seemed chaotic to those watching from the Galactic Council station, but was actually a complex tactical arrangement designed for maximum firepower and mutual support. Each ship was a product of humanity's violent history, incorporating lessons learned from countless wars fought on their dangerous homeworld. "Enemy fleet is closing to engagement range," reported the tactical officer. "Wait for it," Rodriguez said quietly. Around him, his bridge crew held their breath. The Krogar ships were fast, designed for hit-and-run tactics that had served them well against the peaceful species of the galaxy. But humanity was not a peaceful species. "Contact in 30 seconds, the tactical officer announced. "Signal to all ships," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying across the fleet's communication network. "Remember, we're here to protect the innocent and punish those who prey on the weak. Show them no mercy, because they would show none to us." The Krogar fleet struck first, their plasma cannons and particle beams lashing out across space toward the human ships. The energy weapons that had destroyed dozens of peaceful colonies struck the human vessels and seemed to have no effect at all. Graktor watched in disbelief as his fleet's opening salvo was absorbed by the human ship's shields without even causing them to slow down. "Impossible," he breathed. "Nothing can shrug off that much firepower." Then the humans returned fire, and Graktor learned what real weapons looked like. The human ships unleashed a storm of destruction that seemed to tear reality itself apart. Kinetic weapons that moved at significant fractions of light speed, energy weapons that burned hotter than stellar cores, and missiles that seemed to think for themselves as they wove through the Krogar formation. The first wave of human fire destroyed 30 Krogar ships in less than 10 seconds. A cry for aid echoed across the stars. Third document. The battle that followed would be remembered throughout the galaxy as the moment everything changed. What the Krogar had expected to be a simple raid against defenseless prey became a demonstration of why some species were called Deathworlders. War Chief Graktor watched in horror as his seemingly invincible fleet was systematically dismantled by the human forces. The weapons that had terrorized peaceful colonies for decades seemed like toys compared to the devastating firepower the humans brought to bear. "Evasive maneuvers!" Graktor roared, but his ships were too slow, too clumsy compared to the human vessels that moved through space like predators, born to hunt among the stars. The Blood Reaper shuddered under repeated impacts from human kinetic weapons. Each projectile hit with the force of a small nuclear weapon, and Graktor could hear his ship's hull groaning under the assault. "Damage report," he demanded. "Shields down to 20%? Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7? Weapon systems are failing across the board," his damage control officer reported with panic in his voice. Around him, the Krogar fleet was dying. Ships that had seemed unstoppable were being torn apart by weapons that fired faster and hit harder than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans fought with a precision and ruthlessness that spoke of a species that had been forged in the fires of countless wars. "Sir, the humans are hailing us," his communications officer announced. "Put it through." Admiral Rodriguez's voice filled the bridge, and now Graktor could hear the cold fury that lurked beneath the humans' controlled tone. "War Chief Graktor, you have 30 seconds to order your remaining ships to surrender, or we will destroy every last one of them. Choose wisely." Graktor looked at his tactical display. In less than 15 minutes of combat, his fleet of 200 ships had been reduced to fewer than 50 operational vessels. The humans had lost exactly 0 ships, though a few showed minor damage to their shields. For the first time in his life, the proud Krogar warrior felt fear. "All ships," he transmitted on the fleet frequency, his voice heavy with defeat, "cease fire and surrender. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded." The silence that followed was deafening. Never before in Krogar history had an entire raiding fleet surrendered to an enemy. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Rodriguez allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. The battle had gone exactly as planned, though he took no pleasure in the destruction that had been necessary to stop the Krogar assault. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Velthari colony," reported his communications officer. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was soft, melodic, and filled with gratitude that transcended species barriers. "Human ships, this is colony leader Velthani. We cannot express our gratitude for what you have done. You saved not just our lives, but the lives of millions of our people. We are forever in your debt." "No debt is owed," Rodriguez replied gently. "We came because you called for help, and will always answer such calls. That's what civilized beings do for each other." As the human fleet began the process of securing the surrendered Krogar vessels and providing aid to the damaged Velthari ships, news of the battle spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. On the Galactic Council station, the command center was in chaos. The sensor readings they were receiving seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. "The entire Krogar fleet has surrendered," Zexhai announced, her harmonic voice filled with disbelief. "The humans destroyed over 150 warships in less than 20 minutes, with 0 losses of their own." Council leader Morthak stood in stunned silence, his scales cycling through colors he hadn't displayed in decades. The implications of what they had witnessed were staggering. Send a diplomatic envoy to the human fleet immediately, he ordered. We need to establish formal contact with these Deathworlders before anyone else does something stupid. Sulvek's gaseous form swirled with agitation. Council leader, should we be concerned about the humans? Their military capabilities far exceed anything we've encountered. On the contrary, Morthak replied thoughtfully, I think we should be grateful. They could have easily ignored the Velthari distress call, or worse, they could have chosen to raid our shipping lanes like the Krogar. Instead, they risked their lives to save people they'd never met, asking for nothing in return. The wisdom in the old reptilian's words was not lost on the assembled council members. The galaxy had just witnessed the emergence of a new power, but unlike the Krogar, the humans seemed to use their strength to protect rather than to prey upon the weak. Within hours, diplomatic vessels from dozens of species were racing toward the Kepler 442 system, all hoping to establish contact with the mysterious humans. Trade delegations, cultural ambassadors, and military observers all wanted to learn more about Earth's Deathworlders. But perhaps the most significant response came from the Velthari themselves. Colony leader Velthani composed a message that would be broadcast throughout the galaxy, ensuring that every civilized species would learn of what the humans had done. To all who receive this transmission, the message began, we want the galaxy to know that when we called for help in our darkest hour, it was the humans of Earth who answered. They came not for profit, not for conquest, but simply because it was the right thing to do. They risked their lives for strangers, asked for nothing in return, and treated our attackers with mercy even after defeating them. The message continued with a formal invitation for humanity to join the Galactic Council, an offer that would transform the political landscape of known space. When Admiral Rodriguez received the Council's diplomatic overtures, he transmitted them back to Earth for consideration by the civilian government. The response came back within hours. Admiral, this is President Chen, the transmission began, and Rodriguez smiled at hearing his daughter's voice. Sarah had grown up to follow in his footsteps, but had chosen the path of diplomacy rather than warfare. The United Earth government has reviewed the Galactic Council's invitation, and we accept. However, we want to make our position clear from the beginning. We will not tolerate the strong preying upon the weak. We will defend those who cannot defend themselves, and we will use whatever force is necessary to maintain peace. We also want to establish a new doctrine for galactic civilization. Any species that attacks peaceful colonies, enslaves other beings, or commits genocide will face the combined might of Earth's defense forces. We've seen too much death and suffering in our own history to allow it to continue among the stars. As the message spread throughout the galaxy, reactions were immediate and varied. Peaceful species welcomed humanity with open arms, seeing them as protectors who would ensure their safety. Aggressive species suddenly found themselves reconsidering their expansion plans. Knowing that Earth's Deathworlders were watching, the Krogar prisoners were processed according to human military law, but with a twist that surprised the galaxy. Rather than executing the raiders or enslaving them as many species would have done, the humans offered them a choice: face trial for their crimes, or accept rehabilitation and integration into human society. Graktor, sitting in his cell aboard a human prison ship, found himself confronted by something he had never encountered before: mercy from a stronger enemy. A human officer, Colonel Sarah Chen, came to speak with him personally. Why? Graktor asked, his voice filled with confusion. Your people could have destroyed us all. We would have shown you no mercy. Why spare us? Sarah looked at the massive Krogar warrior thoughtfully before answering. Because we believe that strength should be used to protect, not to destroy. Because we think even raiders and killers can be redeemed if they're willing to try. And because showing mercy to a defeated enemy takes more courage than simply pulling a trigger. Your species will rule the galaxy, Graktor said quietly. With weapons like yours, nothing could stand against you. Rule? Sarah shook her head. We don't want to rule anyone. We just want to make sure that when someone calls for help, there's always someone willing to answer. As the human fleet prepared to depart the Kepler 442 system, they left behind more than just grateful Velthari colonists. They left a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Earth's Deathworlders had arrived, and they stood ready to defend anyone who needed protecting. The age of predators preying on the peaceful was ending. The humans had seen to that. Years later, when historians tried to identify the moment that galactic civilization truly began, they would point to the Battle of Kepler 442. Not because it was the largest battle ever fought, or because it involved the most advanced technology, but because it was the moment when someone finally stood up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. And from that day forward, whenever a distress call echoed across the stars, every species in the galaxy knew that somewhere, Earth's Deathworlders were listening, ready to answer the call for aid. The galaxy had found its guardians, and they came from a small blue world that had forged them in the fires of 1,000 wars, teaching them that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when to show mercy and when to stand firm against those who would harm the innocent. Earth's children had come to the stars, and the universe would never be the same.